Hi everyone, this is Jerry. The 2010 World Blitz Chess Championship was held in Moscow, Russia from November 16th through the 18th. 38 rounds were played, 20 players competed, and the time controls were set such that each player began with 3 minutes, and whenever a move was played, that player gained 2 seconds on the clock. The tournament winner was Levon Aronian of Armenia. He finished with 24.5 points out of a possible 38. In second was Timur Rajabov with 24. Third, Magnus Carlsen with 23.5. Boris Gelfand took fourth with 21.5, and fifth was Hikaru Nakamura also with 21.5. This particular game was from round 33 between Levon Aronian, who had the white pieces, versus Hikaru Nakamura, and for the most part I'll just be showing how the game played through, just making some brief points along the way. I think it's pretty interesting to see how strong a moves you could see despite the short time control. So let's have a look. Levon with white d4, Hikaru black knight f6. We quickly enter a King's Indian setup. Both players just getting their minor pieces out, getting castled. a6, this move looks to prepare this b5 advance. b3, rook b8. Finally this pawn is supported enough. a6, rook b8. b5 could come next if white allows it, and white does allow it. Continuing with just development, one quick point to make is that if white tries to stop this advance with a4 here, the drawback with that is now b4 is now weakened, and so you could see maybe a5, and black is starting to clamp down on this weak point b4. But we don't see a4. Instead, bishop b2, b5 comes, exchange of pawns followed by rook c1. Very logical. That's an open file. The knight gets chased to the edge, and this knight move was made as a reaction to the threat. Rook takes knight. From here, this knight is going to want to get to this b5 square. One thing to note from here is that this is a weak point in the white position, since there's a pawn in white's territory controlling this square, and that c3 square is a hole. So you're really just going to want to take good care of that square if you're playing the white side here. d5 gains space in the center, and now this bishop can see clearly. Black is trying to establish a pawn in the center with that e5 move. We have the exchange of pawns followed by queen c2, so pressure against this point. We have this small sort of pawn center. Is this a liability or an asset? It comes under a lot of fire very soon, and in fact black ends up blundering a pawn very quickly. c5 was the move played here to meet that threat of queen takes pawn. And after the rook comes here, the threat is just knight takes pawn, since this pawn is pinned to the queen. Queen e7 was played. That's like a knee-jerk reaction, really. As soon as the rook is placed opposite your queen, you just try and get it off the file. Unfortunately, runs into just rook takes pawn. White is simply up a pawn, and if the queen takes the rook, we're going to have this tactic. The rook is going to be won back. So what black decides is just to admit, okay, I'm down a pawn. I blundered that pawn away. Let's just continue with development. Bishop b7, and now we have rook just coming all the way back to d1. Now typically if this was a standard game with longer time controls, I don't think we would be seeing this rook coming all the way back. More common would just be the doubling of rooks along this file. But I think I would pretty much just chalk this move up as, alright, you know what, I just won a pawn, let's just get out of any possibilities of, let's say, my rook getting trapped. You know, if the rook comes here, bishop here, is this going to be a problem for me? You know, is it going to get trapped at some point? Queen here wouldn't be any good because knight here. So I think just bringing the rook all the way back is, again, just saying let's get out of any possibilities for maybe my rook getting trapped. I'm already up a pawn, so let's play things out from here. Rook c8, defend c5, knight e5, a more central square for the knight, and now there's tension between these guys. We have the exchange of pawns. Knight b5, here it comes. It's eyeing actually 2 pivot points. This knight is supporting both of, or these pawns here are supporting c3 and d4 for the knight. King g1 just gets out of any possible checks along this diagonal at an inopportune moment. Knight d5, we have more pieces just focusing their sights on c3, and this bishop potentially will eye that c3 square directly. After this e4 move, this is move 22, and already at this point in the game, both players are under 1 minute remaining on their clock. So knight c3, rook to d7 hits the queen, queen f6 hits the knight, and now f4. I don't think black realized it at this point. I know that when I was watching it initially, I didn't realize that this black queen is now essentially in stalemate. Wherever she goes, she could be captured. Black follows up with knight d4, hitting the queen, and after queen g2, both players on the clock at this point are at just about 10 seconds remaining. But again, with that time control of, or with the idea of gaining 2 seconds whenever you make a move, the game is still able to go on into 70 plus moves. So we have this knight fork going on here. King goes in the corner, knight takes rook, and we don't recapture, but instead knight g4 hits this queen, and she's cooked. What can she do? Really, the best thing to do is just give yourself up for a more valuable piece. So that's why we see the queen go back to d8, her home square. Rook takes queen, rook takes rook, and now bishop takes, finally on this c1 square, followed by knight takes pawn. Levon ends up capturing the knight like this and allows this continuation. The queen ends up getting one back, and we have an instance here where we essentially have a rook versus 2 minor pieces. One other quick variation to just point out is from right here. At this point right here, both of these knights could go to this square. In the game, this knight went there. But how might have things been different if this knight came here? Let's have a quick look. King here, knight takes rook, knight here would still follow after these moves. We have an instance now where if this knight is captured, this rook can come directly to this d1 square without having to move a knight. In that previous variation, there was a knight here, but now, since there isn't, this rook could immediately come to d1, and we have white simply just losing the game now, because not only does the queen get captured, but we have yet another fork coming into play. This bishop will be lost, and black will simply be up a full rook. So that didn't occur, and actually if it did occur in that way, we wouldn't be seeing bishop takes knight at this point, but most certainly something else. So how things played out, really it wasn't this knight, but instead the knight on c that played to e2, and we essentially had this sort of ending going on, an imbalanced position, a rook versus 2 minor pieces. c4 is just looking to create a passed pawn. e5 trying to shut down this bishop, takes bishop here. The big thing at this point, white is trying to stay coordinated, trying to just get their pieces coordinated. These minor pieces are lacking pivot squares. There's no pawns like in let's say like this section of the board here that can act as support points for these minor pieces. So you're really going to need maybe this king's help in some way to help out with that coordination. And in the meantime, this rook is just trying to keep the white pieces uncoordinated, or maybe just try and win material. And in fact, at this point right here, after knight to d2, black ends up playing b3, but rook here would end up winning material. These two pieces are forked. How to really defend? You could play bishop here, but now all of a sudden, now this pawn gets pushed here, and this knight is going to end up having to give itself up for the pawn. We would have had this sort of ending coming into play, but again, both players in very serious time control already when that queen moved to g2. Again, both players were at about 10 seconds, so both players most certainly in blitz mode here, and this king finally starts to get involved here. These knights are connected finally, and actually everything is strung together at this point here. The knights are connected, the knights guarding this bishop, king's moving more central, and what else do we have that's going on? Now black has to be really careful with how they move their king, especially when these two knights are on the board. Usually just when you have one knight in proximity to your own king, you're really asking for trouble in trying to avoid some sort of a fork, but now we have two knights that you have to kind of cope with. That's really going to spell disaster. After knight c5, unfortunately this pawn is just toast. There's no way to really guard it, and so we have just b2, knight takes pawn, rook takes. So now since that pawn is grabbed, we just have more action coming over on the king side of the board. This king is just trying its best to really just stay out of any forks. After this bishop move here, everything is really just strung together. Knight check, king c4, knight check, king here, and eventually what we have is the position where this pawn is going to fall, and with check in that position. G5, bishop takes, bishop here, and soon enough we're going to have the position more simplified, and this pawn right here not even it can't be stopped at this point. The rook gives check, king here, rook up, pawn here allows for this knight support. After king d5, knight here, this pawn can't be stopped, and that's just the ball game. Black ends up resigning. So that's all for this video. Hope you got something out of it. Take care. Bye.